Christine Schultz was born on November 15, 1950. At age 30, she was a mother of two, living in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where she was trying to make a fresh start after a difficult divorce from her first husband, Alfred Schultz, a Milwaukee police detective who went by Fred. Christine had custody of their two sons and was now dating a man named Stuart Hoenick. Unfortunately, she would never get to enjoy her new life because in the spring of 1981, a horrible tragedy occurred. On May 27, 1981, Christine had spent the evening with Stuart before returning home to her sons. Around 2 a.m., an intruder entered her home, bound her hands, gagged her with a bandana, and shot her in the back with a .38 caliber revolver. Her two sons, Sean and Shannon, sadly witnessed the aftermath. Sean later recalled hearing a loud noise like a firecracker and saw a masked man fleeing the house. At first glance, there appeared to be no obvious motive. No valuables were stolen, and there was no sign of forced entry, suggesting a crime of passion or something intended to silence Christine. However, the details of her murder would set off a series of events that would lead to accusations, trials, and a media sensation. Sean's description of the intruder as a tall man with reddish-brown hair tied in a ponytail did not immediately provide any clear leads. But the investigation took a dramatic turn when the focus shifted to her ex-husband's second wife, Laurie Bembenek, who went by Bambi. Bambi was a former police officer and ex-Playboy Bunny whose name would become synonymous with the case. Bambi had this to say: "I worked as a waitress at the Playboy Club for just 3 weeks, but it seemed like I'd always be remembered as the Playboy Bunny." This brief stint would become a defining part of her public narrative, one the media eagerly clung to. In March 1980, she joined the Milwaukee police force, eager to prove herself in a male-dominated field. However, after only a few months, Bambi was dismissed during her probationary period and filed a sex discrimination complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, alleging her dismissal was rooted in gender bias rather than performance issues. After leaving the police department, Bambi's life took another dramatic turn when she became involved with Fred. Their relationship escalated quickly, and within 3 months of Fred's divorce from Christine, he married Bambi on January 29, 1981. Their whirlwind relationship would soon lead to a scandal and tragedy. As the investigation into Christine's murder progressed, Bambi's connection to the crime became more apparent. She had reportedly expressed jealousy over the financial support Fred was still providing Christine, including alimony payments. They also located witnesses who said Bambi had talked about blowing Christine's head off and had even approached people about hiring someone to kill her. The breakthrough in the investigation came when a reddish-brown wig was found clogging the plumbing of the apartment building where Bambi lived. Fibers from the wig were found to match those discovered at the crime scene. Further forensic analysis linked Bambi's hair to that found on Christine's gag. The final piece of evidence came when Fred's off-duty revolver was found to be the murder weapon. Bambi had access to the gun, and the ballistics matched the fatal shot. In late June 1981, Bambi was arrested. The investigation also revealed troubling details about Fred's alibi. While he had claimed to be on duty the night of the murder, he later admitted to lying about his whereabouts, revealing he had been drinking at a bar with a fellow officer. Despite Fred's lies, he was cleared of direct involvement, and all evidence pointed toward Bambi as the killer. On March 9, 1982, after a 3-week trial, Bambi was convicted of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. Her case became a media sensation, with Bambi becoming a controversial figure. Many believed she was wrongfully convicted and rallied behind her. T-shirts emblazoned with "Run, Bambi, Run" were sold, and a Bambi look-alike contest was held in her honor. In 1990, Bambi escaped from Tachita Correctional Institution with the help of her fiancé, Dominique Gugliotto. The two fled to Canada, where they spent 3 months on the run before being captured in Thunder Bay, Ontario. Supporters continued to rally for her, convinced she had been the victim of a miscarriage of justice. After her capture and extradition, Bambi was granted a judicial review, which revealed significant mistakes in the original investigation. While no conspiracy was proven, the errors in handling evidence were enough to warrant a new trial. Rather than face the possibility of a second conviction, Bambi pled no contest to second-degree murder in 1992. She was released after serving just over 10 years in prison. Despite her release, Bambi continued to maintain her innocence. In 2002, after completing her parole, she filed a motion seeking DNA testing to clear her name. In the midst of this legal battle, she was severely injured while attempting to escape during a Dr. Phil show appearance. The fall resulted in the amputation of her right foot. Bambi's case continued to make headlines, with her attorney pushing for a pardon. Despite her efforts, Bambi's request for posthumous pardons remained unanswered. Her legal fight to clear her name was fueled by new DNA evidence, but no conclusive match has yet been made. Bambi died on November 20, 2010, in hospice care after battling liver and kidney failure, a complication of hepatitis C. Her death did little to quiet the controversy surrounding her case, with many still believing she was wrongfully convicted. To this day, her story remains one of the most discussed and debated in Wisconsin's criminal history. Christine Schultz's murder was ultimately solved with the conviction of Bambi, but questions about the investigation, Bambi's role, and the involvement of others still linger. As the case continues to unfold, some wonder if there's more to the story than what has been revealed. Was Bambi framed? And if she wasn't the killer, then who was? Here are reasons people believe she is innocent. They believe the evidence was weak, considering it was only the wig and Christine's hair on a pair of her pants. Some believe she was framed for her accusations of gender discrimination while on the Milwaukee force. Some believe she wasn't really that jealous of Christine. There were also allegedly conflicting witness testimonies, and some even recanted or later altered their stories. Some have also criticized the defense team for not aggressively challenging the prosecution's evidence. It was also said that some jurors' opinions were shifted because of her prior work as a waitress at a Playboy club. Some point to the polygraph she passed, while others point to the individuals who reportedly confessed or implicated themselves in the crime but were never formally charged. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. At the age of 31, Kathryn Donohue lived in Arlington, Virginia, where she worked as a secretary. She was known for her warmth and hardworking nature and had her whole life ahead of her before she encountered a very evil individual. Unfortunately, there isn't much public information available about her personal life, including whether she ever married or had children. Regardless, on March 3, 1979, Kathryn's body was discovered by someone walking through a parking lot in the 8400 block of Hamlin Street in Glenarden, Virginia. She had been sexually assaulted and beaten to death. Law enforcement quickly responded, launching an investigation that included collecting forensic evidence, interviewing potential witnesses, and following numerous leads. However, despite their efforts, the case quickly grew cold. The forensic technology of the time, particularly DNA testing, was not advanced enough to provide meaningful evidence or identify a suspect. As the years passed, the case grew colder, and Kathryn's family was left to cope with the tragedy of not knowing who murdered their loved one. That is, until 2024, when the Prince George's County Police Department's Cold Case Unit decided to revisit the case with modern forensic advancements. Evidence from the crime scene was sent to Othram, and a comprehensive genetic profile was created. This profile was then submitted to the FBI's Forensic Genetic Genealogy team, who worked tirelessly to track down potential relatives of the suspect. Their hard work paid off when they identified Rodger Zodas Brown, now in his 80s, as a person of interest. While Brown was never considered a suspect during the original investigation, he did live in the area about 15 miles from Arlington. A DNA sample was then obtained from Brown and confirmed the match, conclusively linking him to Kathryn's murder. Brown has been charged with first-degree murder and sexual assault. Plus, investigators are now looking into whether he may be connected to any other unsolved crimes from that time period. As of now, he remains in jail, awaiting the outcome of the case. Martika Ferguson, known as Tika, was born on May 20th, 1993, in Colorado Springs, Colorado, to Leela Edwards and Gothi Barksdale. She was then adopted by David and Effie Ferguson in 1999. At age 27, she lived in Enid, Oklahoma, and was the mother of a young son, Devontae. Described as having a joyful personality and a brilliant smile, Martika loved to sing and dance, and found solace in music. She was a former high school cheerleader and was known for her artistic spirit, vibrant personality, and deep devotion to her child. However, her promising life was tragically cut short when she was shot and left for dead in an alley. An autopsy later confirmed that the weapon used was a shotgun. Investigators quickly identified a suspect after analyzing surveillance footage from nearby businesses and residences. The suspect was 30-year-old Shane Perosi, a convicted felon with a criminal history, including a child abuse conviction in 2010 and an assault on an officer charge in 2016. Notably, Perosi's residence was just a block away from where Tika's body was found. On December 2, 2020, SWAT officers executed a no-knock warrant at Perosi's home, arresting him on charges of first-degree murder, destruction of evidence, and possession of a firearm after a felony conviction. Surveillance footage played a crucial role in the investigation, capturing Tika walking alone before encountering a biker wearing a black jacket and a cowboy hat, later identified as Perosi. The two were seen walking toward Hallmark Baptist Church and then into an alley where they moved out of the camera's view. 12 minutes later, Perosi was seen alone, leaving the scene on his motorcycle. Investigators received an anonymous tip that helped identify Perosi. The tipster revealed that he and Tika had dated in the past, and she occasionally stayed at his residence, which was set up in a garage. The tipster also stated that Perosi had sent threatening messages, including one that ominously mentioned, "You might end up like your girl Tika. I hear they found her dead yesterday." Upon searching Perosi's home, authorities found evidence linking him to the crime, including the distinctive jacket seen in the surveillance footage. When confronted with the evidence, Perosi confessed to killing Martika. His statements to investigators were chilling. He said he was glad he killed her and did it to teach her a lesson. He further expressed frustration with people he referred to as tweakers, whom he accused of stealing from him. Perosi alleged that a friend had caught Martika inside his home the day before her death, leading him to ban her from his residence. He stated that she was only permitted to be near the church, but not his house. Despite his admission of guilt, Perosi attempted to shift partial blame on Martika, claiming that she had grabbed the gun after he cocked it and that it accidentally discharged. Nonetheless, his statements and actions made it clear that the killing was intentional. In the end, he pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison. Pauline Brazeau was born on September 1, 1959, of Métis descent. Although she was Métis, she and her family did not grow up within First Nations culture. At 16, Pauline was a young mother from Saskatchewan who had recently relocated to Calgary, Alberta, Canada, in the fall of 1975 with her infant daughter and older sister. On January 8, 1976, Pauline spent the evening at her aunt's house, partying with friends. Around 2:30 a.m., she and another person decided to go eat pizza at Pepe's restaurant, located at 7th Street and 17th Avenue in Calgary. After finishing their meal, they left together, but Pauline soon realized she had forgotten her gloves. She returned to the restaurant alone, heavily intoxicated, to retrieve them. Unable to find them, she left and began walking back to her aunt's house. Sadly, she would never arrive. Approximately 5 hours later, on January 9, 1976, Pauline's partially clothed body was found on Jumping Pond Forestry Road, a remote area located about 22 miles southwest of Cochrane, Alberta. She had been stabbed to death, and an autopsy confirmed the manner of death was homicide. Pauline's murder was among a series of unsolved cases in the Calgary area during the 1970s and early 1980s. Authorities suspected that her case was linked to the so-called highway murders, a series of killings in which young women were sexually assaulted and left in remote locations along the Trans-Canada Highway. However, despite extensive investigations, no suspect was identified at the time, and the case eventually went cold. In 1995, a task force was formed to investigate historical homicides, including Pauline's case, but it remained unsolved. In 2021, the Alberta Royal Canadian Mounted Police Historical Homicide Unit partnered with the Calgary Police Service Cold Case Homicide Unit to reanalyze unsolved murders from the 1970s, leveraging new advancements in forensic technology. In 2022, investigators turned to Othram, whose scientists developed a comprehensive DNA profile for the unknown suspect. That profile was then analyzed by forensic genealogists from Convergence Investigative Genetic Genealogy. By 2023, investigators had identified a suspect, 73-year-old Ronald James Edwards of Sundre, Alberta. Unfortunately, no photo of Edwards was released. On November 7, 2023, he was arrested and charged with non-capital murder, the classification used in the criminal code at the time of Pauline's death. Authorities revealed that Edwards had a violent criminal history. In 1989, he was convicted in Calgary of attempted murder and sexual assault and sentenced to 10 years in prison. He later attempted to appeal his conviction but was unsuccessful. In the end, Edwards admitted to killing Pauline and pleaded guilty to a charge of manslaughter. He was then sentenced to 6.5 years in prison. At age 41, Stephen Edenfield was a private man who worked for the phone company and kept much of his personal life to himself. He lived in Tampa, Florida, in a condo at the Racket Club complex, just minutes away from his mother, brother, and sister. Though he was close to his family, he rarely shared details about his personal life because this was the 90s and homosexuality wasn't as widely accepted. On the evening of January 31st, 1997, Stephen had dinner with his brother and sister before heading out for drinks. He left alone and later returned to his condo just before 1 a.m. As he approached the gated entrance, he realized he had forgotten his remote he needed to enter, but the security guard was nice enough to let him in. He also allowed the car behind Stephen to enter at Stephen's request. Unfortunately, the guard didn't get a good look at the driver of the second vehicle. Shortly after Stephen entered his apartment, neighbors reported hearing a disturbance, furniture breaking, yelling, and cries for help. By 2 a.m., the security guard conducting his routine rounds noticed a shadowy figure lurking near Stephen's apartment. The figure quickly disappeared, and the guard didn't think much of it at the time. The next morning, Stephen failed to show up to his mother's place to take over for his brother James, who was caring for their mother. This was unlike Stephen, and a concerned James began trying to call him, but there was no answer. By 10 a.m., James decided to go check on him. When he pulled into the complex, he noticed Stephen's car was still parked in its usual spot. He climbed the stairs to his brother's condo and found the door unlocked. Inside, he was met with a horrifying scene. The apartment was in disarray, furniture overturned, and items broken. In the dimly lit bedroom, Stephen lay in bed, unresponsive. Blood stained the walls and sheets, and scrawled across the bedroom wall, written in Stephen's own blood, was the word greed. Shaken, James ran out to the superintendent's office, barely able to speak, and had them call 911. The brutal nature of the crime suggested a deeply personal attack, yet with no signs of forced entry and few immediate leads, the case quickly went cold. Decades later, in 2022, the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office Cold Case Unit revisited the case, utilizing advanced forensic DNA testing conducted by Othram Labs. This renewed effort was funded by a Bureau of Justice Assistance grant and involved forensic genetic genealogy analysis. In 2024, investigators identified an unknown DNA profile that not only linked to Stephen's murder, but also to an unsolved 2005 sexual assault case in Illinois. The breakthrough led authorities to Brandon Gliha, a 47-year-old man living in Tampa, Florida. Gliha had recently been arrested on an unrelated forgery warrant out of Illinois in February 2025. While in custody, investigators obtained a DNA sample which matched evidence from the 1997 crime scene. Confronted with the evidence, Gliha confessed to his involvement in Stephen's murder. Gliha claimed that a man known only as Chino had picked him up that night, and the two went to Stephen's condo. He alleged that Chino intended for him to engage in a sexual act with Stephen, which left him feeling violated and angry. According to Gliha, an argument ensued between Chino and Stephen over money, leading Gliha to throw a porcelain statue at Stephen. A struggle followed, and Gliha stated that Chino ultimately stabbed Stephen to death. Despite his claims of limited involvement, authorities have not indicated if they're searching for the man known only as Chino. Regardless, on February 24, 2025, Gliha was officially charged with first-degree murder with a weapon and robbery with a deadly weapon. He remains in custody without bond. Stephen's brother, James, who had discovered the horrifying scene nearly 3 decades earlier, lived to see justice served. However, their mother and sister, both of whom had shared Stephen's final evening, passed away before Gliha's arrest. James revealed that their mother had suffered multiple heart attacks and a stroke, believing that the weight of Stephen's unsolved murder had contributed to her declining health. After 28 years, the brutal murder of Stephen Edenfield has finally been solved, offering a long-awaited sense of closure for those who loved him. However, lingering questions remain about the full circumstances of that fateful night and whether others were involved in the crime.